Welcome back, everybody, to Totally Goated. It's been a couple weeks since we put out the last episode. I apologize for the delay there. Some busy life events have occurred, but we were waiting for the man, the myth, the legend himself to appear here on the podcast. He's the host of the new burgeoning Washington Commanders podcast, The Command Center. If you haven't checked that out already, I encourage you guys to do so on Instagram and on Twitter. And do you have it on Spotify as well?
Nah,
Joe?
just YouTube right now.
Just YouTube. Okay, is it the Command Center?
Yeah, same thing.
Right, Command Center on YouTube. Mr. Joe Henry, a friend of mine from Rutgers University. Joe, how you been, my friend?
Yeah, I'm great, man. Thanks for having you. I haven't seen you since the school year wrapped up, so good to get into touch and catch up a little bit.
It's always a pleasure, man. And I want to start before we get into the nitty gritty of the Commanders. I want to start with an episode that kind of went viral in my like a little mini group of ours. Your interaction with Tim Moore on Sports Speak Live it's the parent podcast of our sportspeaklive.com. Check that out too if you guys haven't already. I want to get your thoughts kind of on that conversation that transpired and what kind of led into that whole moment.
Yeah, so Eddie reached out to me asking to be on Sports Speak Live, and I was very honored because that's kind of why I started my podcast. Was I noticed that you, Atlas, you guys all have podcasts, so I was like, all right, these are all Rutgers people for all the viewers out there, and I was like, all right, let me try that out. So I just started my Commanders podcast, and I pride myself on being a diehard Commanders fan. You can see a Terry McLaurin fathead on my mirror there.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
Yeah. So I feel like I know the team in and out almost. I really have a good sense of them. And, I went on the podcast pretty, eager to just rebuttal with them because they had some strong opinions. And listen, I'm not saying the Commanders are going to be that good next year, but I don't think they're going to be as bad as Tim Moore and Eddie Kalegi were saying. And I noticed that Tim's discussion tactic was kind of just loudness and aggressiveness, and not exactly based on great point making. He knows a lot about stuff, and I'll give him that. But I think when it comes to the Commanders, he's a little bit ill-informed. He kept talking about the wide receiving core as a weakness, which is actually one of the strongest units on the team. We've got a lot of weaknesses, but like the wide receiver core with Terry McLaurin, Curtis Samuel, Jahan Dotson, and then a few years ago we drafted Dyami Brown in the third round. I think it's a pretty good unit. He was talking about Antonio Gibson being done as a running back. I don't really know what that means. He's the starting running back. Listen, you can come at the Commanders all day long. You can say that we have an unproven quarterback. Fair. The defensive line has underperformed. Fair. The offensive line is trash. Fair. But he was going after things that, in my, I would say, expert opinion, when it comes to all things Commanders, just were not true at all.
Yeah, and you touched on it, the running back room, that Antonio Gibson, Brian Robinson Jr., which his story is crazy enough as is. Again, gets shot before the season starts last year, comes back with a vengeance, and still averaged some solid efficiency on the ground in his limited action last year, and he's expected to play a big role this season. But I want to get your thoughts kind of on somebody that personally I never heard of until a couple of weeks ago, Mr. Chris Rodriguez, a 6th-round draft pick. Want to get your thoughts on him making the final 53, and do you think he's going to play a big role this season out of the backfield?
Yeah, so when you look at this Washington running back room, right, you've had a lot of guys rotate in that third role. At first, when Ron came in, it was Antonio Gibson, J.D. McKissick, and then that third guy was kind of nobody. For a while, it was Jarrett Patterson, an undrafted free agent rookie out of Buffalo, I believe. And, it's kind of just been mix and match, and a few guys come in, haven't really performed. And then we brought in Brian Robinson to kind of be the power back to Antonio Gibson's thunder. So I love that duo, and what I think Chris Rodriguez offers is he's another change of pace back. He's fast, he's elusive, but he's also got some good power. I think he's a fantastic third back to have because I don't see him getting a whole lot of action unless somebody gets hurt. I think we're going to see a lot of guys like Curtis Samuel in the backfield, which is how he was used in Carolina, and I think Eric Bieniemy is going to use him the same way in DC this season. So I feel like Chris Rodriguez is not going to get a whole lot of carries, a whole lot of snaps, but let's say on the off chance Antonio Gibson or Brian Robinson got hurt, I think he'd step up and be a pretty good back to have. I mean, you pick him in, I believe it was the 6th round, maybe. He's a very late round pick, but it's just a good third option to have. I mean, other guys, like he beat out Jarrett Patterson, who's been really good for us in that third back role. So I feel pretty confident in that, but I don't think he's going to play a big role this season, honestly.
Yeah, it was just impressive to kind of see a guy. It's like you said, he's a 6th round draft pick this year's 2023 NFL draft. Just to see a guy like that come out and dominate in the preseason, really make a statement, show the hunger and the work ethic that you really look for in those late round picks. Those diamonds in the rough are so important to building any NFL roster, and Chris Rodriguez looked like he had it. So the Washington Commanders being able to find that diamond in the rough talent, those players that you may not know a lot about, but you go out, you do your homework. It's only going to bode well for them this season
Yeah.
going forward.
When you look at the roster Washington has constructed, they've kind of made a lot of their best players in these late round picks. Like, do you know who Cameron Curl is?
I do.
Yeah, he's like one of the star safeties for Washington. He was a 7th-round draft pick. And then we got guys like Derek Forrest, who I believe was a 5th-round pick. Now he's going to be a starting safety. We cut, what's his name? He's on the Giants now. He used to be on the Dolphins. Bobby McCain. Bobby McCain was our starting free safety. We cut him just so this guy, Derek Forrest, could play more. They've got a fantastic job finding these late round draft picks on the defensive end to be like good players. And I think now we're seeing that on the offensive end with guys like, Chris Paul, who's in contention to be the new starting left guard for the Commanders. And he was a 6th-round pick, I think, last year. And then guys like, Chris Rodriguez this year. So a lot of good options here.
What's up with all these NBA players also having football names as well?
Yeah.
Both offensive linemen, ironically enough, too. Michael Jordan, I believe, is a
on the
offensive guard for the Seattle Seahawks.
Oh, I can see that. Yeah. No, it's fun. I like that a lot. I remember there was a little bit where Chris Paul was on the Wizards. Don't forget, he got traded there this offseason. So we had 2 Chris Pauls in DC, but
right. And one of the main talking points with the Commanders, because personally, I don't watch a lot of I'm not going to come out here and say I know like nearly as much about the Commanders as you do, because like I don't watch them. I don't really hear about them at all. But the one thing that has been garnering headlines across NFL media circles and fan-sided group chat alike is the emergence of Sam Howell. So I want to get your thoughts on him and what you think a realistic expectation would be for the 2023 season.
Yeah, I think Sam Howell was undoubtedly the best quarterback that Washington's had, since healthy Alex Smith, which isn't saying a whole lot. But then you look at all the guys that have cycled through, Dwayne Haskins, rest in peace, Kyle Allen, Taylor Heineke, Carson Wentz, Ryan Fitzpatrick, Garrett Gilbert. These are all guys that are kind of, they were not playing their best football with the Commanders. Carson Wentz is a free agent right now, and Taylor Heineke's a backup. So I think that what Sam Howell offers is, in college, he started as a true freshman for an ACC team, North Carolina. Like, that's a really big deal. And he was amazing. He had 30+ touchdowns, under 10 interceptions, just really great stuff. And then he just fell off a little bit his junior season, declared for the NFL draft. What people don't realize is that he lost his top 3 weapons in Dyami Brown, wide receiver, Michael Carter, running back. You'd know that as a Jets fan. And then Javonte Williams, running back, all who are 3 talented players. I think Michael Carter has been kind of trash in the NFL. He was good as a rookie, but he was awful last year. But Javonte Williams has been really good when healthy, and Dyami Brown has shown promise. So Sam loses all those guys, and his passing stats go down. And Carter and Williams were very involved in the pass game. So then what he does his junior year is his passing numbers all go down a little bit, but his rushing numbers take off. He rushed for 700+ yards and a couple touchdowns, I think 8 or 7 on the ground in his junior season. So the production was there. It just came from a different facet of his game. But as a scout, you're not seeing the same kind of numbers in the passing and a decrease. So he fell all the way. I mean, I think you remember this. He was projected to go in the 1st round, like top of the 1st round when he was a sophomore. You remember that?
Yeah, and didn't he fall all the way to the 5th?
Yeah, first pick of the 5th round. So it never made sense to me from a talent point of view. And, I figured it's just a great flyer pick to take him in the 5th round. And then we bring him in, and he starts as the 3rd quarterback, and then he works his way up because guys like Wentz or Heineke are either not playing well or they're getting hurt. He starts week 18 versus Dallas. I thought it was some of the best quarterback play I'd seen from them all season. The numbers won't get you out of your chair or anything like that, but he had a beautiful deep ball to Terry. He took off and ran with it. I think Howell is a fantastic prospect for athleticism, for arm talent, for accuracy. His personality is that of a franchise quarterback. He's very calm. His demeanor is just relaxed. I love it. It seems like nothing can faze him. I think he's going to be undoubtedly the starter this season. I think he's going to do enough to win the job for next season. Not sure about cementing himself as a franchise quarterback yet, but I think he will be the starter for next year at least as well. I think if you're looking about stats, I'd say probably I'm gonna give a reasonable prediction of I'm gonna say 28 touchdowns, 3,700 yards passing, and 11 picks. And I think a couple like maybe 300, 400 rushing yards and a couple of touchdowns there too.
Yeah, if he lives up to those numbers, that'd be one of the better seasons for a quarterback in the NFL for the 2023 season. And like you were alluding to before with his pedigree in college and kind of this, I don't want to say steep drop off, but there was enough of a drop off to
Yeah,
concern NFL teams going into the pre-draft process, and I feel like that's a huge reason why he fell as far as he did. But the Commanders are clearly getting that better version that they took a flyer on so far, and he killed it in training camp. He killed it in preseason play when he did suit up. So I feel like that's something that Commanders fans definitely have to be excited for.
yeah, I know definitely the entire fan base. It's the most electric I've seen them since I've been a fan. I mean, with Dan Snyder being gone and then Sam Howell, like I went to training camp in July and it was just absolutely packed to the brim. I've never seen anything like that before.
Yeah, man. One other, one side question before we kind of dive into like the nitty gritty of the 53-man roster. Are new ownership? Do you think they're ever going to fix that Sean Taylor abomination of a statue they got in their stadium? Because that's the one thing I every time I think Commanders, I can't stop and think about. I can't like think about them without thinking, man, they really did Sean Taylor dirty with that thing.
Yeah. I mean, I think I completely agree with you. I think, I don't think when you look at it in a vacuum, it's that bad because it's just like his helmet, his jerseys. And, one thing I will note is that it was all very accurate. Sean Taylor, I think maybe his daughter or a family member said that all the clothes were exactly what he would wear. Like he had weird sneakers on and stuff, and people are like, why would they put that there? But those were actually his sneakers that his family gave. So the family loved it, which I will give the Commanders credit for. But I will say the advertising was awful. They said it was going to be a Sean Taylor statue. Like and you imagine like this beautiful piece of like bronze honoring like a fantastic player who tragically passed away. And instead it's just like this mannequin with like this like string and like wires, and it looks disgusting. So I think the media rollout was awful. I think they should have done like a Sean Taylor, like I don't want to say like memorial, but something like that. I mean, I think they have to fix it absolutely. I think they have to. I think it's tricky because it was really bad. They
Oh,
messed up
it
really
was
bad.
terrible. I feel like there's no way of beating around the
Yeah.
bush. Like I was just, I don't know. I mean, then again, I'm also an outsider looking in,
No, I
and
no the
going into
entire
it, I didn't
fan
know
base.
these
Yeah.
details about, the family giving them shoes and kind of like, that kind of makes sense from a style standpoint. Because I was
Yeah.
also one of those people from an outsider perspective, like just looking in and being like, all right, like the shoes don't match the jersey, like.
Yeah.
It looks like they put together like a bunch of toilet paper rolls and like stacked them. I'm like,
Yeah.
I don't know about all this, but
Yeah. I think the
that
only
makes
way
more sense.
I think yeah, the shoes and stuff, that was I was like, what's wrong with the shoes? But did some more research. It's a family thing. Okay, that's great. I think that the only way to really fix it would be to make like an actual statue outside the stadium. I think that would be good. Like an actual Sean Taylor statue. Because that's what they advertised it as, and it just simply was not.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. But going back to kind of this season's Washington Commanders, today was cut day, August 29th. The deadline was 45 minutes ago, actually, 4 p.m. So kind of now that the smoke is settled, I want to get your thoughts. Were there any surprise cuts that you kind of didn't see coming, or that players that the Commanders maybe should have kept that they didn't?
A few are definitely standing out to me. But I think most like all in all, it kind of makes sense. I was surprised they're only keeping three backs, which is something we talked about before with Chris Rodriguez. That feels like an interesting decision, but um, we'll see how it plays out. I was surprised. We have a fullback who was with Ron in Carolina. And one thing about Ron is he loves to bring these guys back and keep them around. Alex Armah, fullback, and he was on Carolina, and then he came to DC, and he's been around. And I thought that he did a pretty good job in the preseason blocking. We had a joint practice with Baltimore a few weeks ago where he was outstanding, and he was cut. I was surprised about that. Terrell Burgess, a safety, I believe he was on the Los Angeles Rams for a bit. We signed him this offseason. I was surprised he didn't make the cut, but there is a lot of depth at the safety room. When you look at guys like Percy Butler, Jatavius Martin, Cameron Curl, Derek Forrest, I believe that's it. I mean, that's a lot of safeties to have either way. I think we have 5 or 6 right now. So I get that he's not on there, but it was a little bit shocking. The offensive line, I think, has been a little bit interesting as well because so we had a 4th-round pick, Braden Daniels. He's an offensive tackle, and he was placed on a season-ending IR before. I think it was yesterday, and everybody was like, "Oh, this is like a stash. Like they drafted him and they're going to stash him because he's nowhere close to ready." And I'm just thinking, why did we draft this guy if he's nowhere close to being ready? And now he's on season-ending IR. And they said it was a minor injury. I think it was something with a rotator cuff that he normally wouldn't be out for the full season for. And I'm concerned because our offensive line is weak, extremely weak. I mean, our starting tackles are Charles Leno and Andrew Wiley right now. Those are both old veterans who haven't really proven much. You know, Wiley was really good with Kansas City, but Patrick Mahomes can make any offensive line look great, in my opinion. So I was surprised about that also because Cleveland Browns offensive lineman DeJuan Jones, they drafted after Daniels, and he's been outstanding this preseason. I think he's going to be the backup to Jedrick Willis, who's one of the best starting tackles in the league. So I was surprised that that move happened, but I've been hearing all camp that he wasn't ready. I think it was just the fact that, you know, he's not cut per se. It wasn't a cut, but it was an interesting roster decision that he's out for the year. And that's not something I'm thrilled about as a fan. So, but they know better. It's just frustrating when you look at the draft status. But besides that, it's been a pretty simple, standard. I know one of our backup defensive ends we've had for a while, James Smith-Williams, was cut, but we've got a 7th-round rookie who apparently was playing, getting reps with the first team in Andre Jones. So he's supposed to be really good as well. So, we'll see. But yeah, the main one that stood out to me was Terrell Burgess, the safety, and Braden Daniels, the tackle.
Yeah, and the offensive line one, definitely comes as a surprise. And I didn't even realize about the 4th-rounder that they're stashed on season end in reserve. Then my question arises of why'd you use such a premium selection on the guy in the first place if you knew his injury situation? Or maybe then again, hindsight could be 2020, and you didn't realize that the injury, rotator cuff injury, could be something more. It could be nerve or ligament damage in the arm, and then that's different. Then you're out longer. Like a rotator cuff is normally I'd say I think it's 6-week injury.
Well, so what I'm hearing from reporters in the fan base is that they didn't put him on the season-ending IR because of the injury, and that's why we're all so frustrated. Because yes, it's an injury, but it's not a major injury like you said. The reason why he's on the season-ending IR is because they don't want him to take up a roster spot because he's not going to play.
Gotcha.
So they're putting him on there just to kind of stash him for next season and just let him grow and develop, which is why the fan base is kind of frustrated that they use such a high selection, But I get what you're saying, and yeah, I don't know why they use such a premium selection, but it doesn't seem like it's an injury thing. I think it's just skill. I think if he was ready, he would be on the roster and he'd play in probably a few weeks.
Yeah, I guess we'll have to wait and see, how he progresses. I mean, for now, I guess you can only chalk it down as injury,
Yeah,
put that
exactly.
in quotation marks, but
yeah.
It could be like an MLB level thing where they're just casting them aside for the next season. But one final thing I want to touch into, you're the Commanders expert, the Commanders fan. Looking at their 2023 regular season slate, record wise, what are your expectations? What do you think they can do?
It's very up and down because I think we're about to see one of the best Commanders teams that we've seen, most certainly since Ron Rivera has become head coach. I mean, we haven't had a winning record yet. It's been last season we went 8-1 when that was the most wins we had in a season under Ron. I think we're definitely gonna be playing the best we've played since Ron got there, but the schedule is brutal. I mean, absolutely brutal. Like if you go through it, there are few and far wins to find. I mean, the easiest win is going to be week 1 against the Cardinals, and they don't even have a starting quarterback right now. It's between Clayton Tune and Joshua Dobbs, who they traded for last week. So that's going to be the easiest one of the season. I think, the heart wants to say 10-7, 9-8. But I think for me, as just a football mind, when you look at the schedule, I mean, we play teams like the Bills, the Broncos, the Jets, Dallas, Philly. It's brutal. I mean, San Francisco. I think it's going to be a 7-10, 8-9 type year. I think if they're really, really good, better than I expect, they could flip that to 9-8, maybe 10-7, but at best, you're looking at third place in the NFC East, in my opinion, and it's going to be a race between the Giants and the Commanders for that third place spot, because I think Dallas and Philly are light years ahead of both these teams roster wise. But it's gonna be an interesting season for Washington. Definitely one of the most intriguing since I've been a fan.
Yeah, and one final. I thought of another question, like kind of like tying into the predictions. A big
Yeah.
part of the Commanders. I don't want to say like collapse, but it was more of like a down year in 2022 was because of that step back in their defense, specifically specifically in the rushing department. So I want to ask, like, do you think the moves that they made in the offseason, like, do you think the moves in the offseason, will result in a bounce back for the defense, or they still have some holes they have to fill before they take that next step?
I think for the defense, I think that Jonathan Allen and Daron Payne are really fantastic up the middle. Chase Young and Montez Sweat are really, you never know how good they're going to be in a given season. And I think that's going to be a huge part of it. I'm hoping one of them will really have a fantastic year. We brought in, we've had a weak linebacking core, which is what you talk about with the rushing attack for years now. We drafted Jamin Davis a few years ago. He's been pretty good. But, it was Cole Holcomb last year was the second linebacker. He got hurt. Now he's gone. Now we brought in Cody Barton from Seattle. He's the new starting second linebacker. It's a 4-3 defense, so you need 3 off-ball linebackers. For some reason, we only ever have like 2 starting quality ones. And because I guess they don't use 3 that much, but our backup is a guy named David Mayo, who you've probably never heard of. He's atrocious. He's like 38 years old and he can't cover pass, but he can go downhill and stop the run. So I think we need a lot of production from our 4th off-ball linebacker in Khaleke Hudson, who's a young guy, in order for that rushing game to really be neutralized. But I think the secondary is going to be much better and way better at containing the pass, because we drafted Emmanuel Forbes in the first round and Jatavius Martin in the second. And I think we've made a lot of great draft picks. But at the end of the day, the defense always starts off slow and then picks up speed in the second half. It's just the offense, Brett. I mean, the offense is always trash. So I think if this offense could take off, then I think it's going to be a big season.
I'll have to stay tuned to see how Sam Howell and the weapons mesh over there in Washington. But Joe, I wanted to thank you again for taking the time today to appear on Totally Goated. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me, man. I really appreciate it. Happy to talk to you. It's been a while. So yeah, wishing you well with all your future endeavors.
Yeah, same here. If you ever need a guest for the Command Center podcast, I'll make sure to do my research beforehand. Come prepared.
That's definitely.
All right, man. Well, this has been Totally Goated. Stay tuned for next week's episode. It's going to be with another former Rutgers WRSU FM student, like friend of mine / broadcaster, John Harnett. We're going to be discussing the New York Jets Hard Knocks and the absolute disaster that is the New York Mets. So you're going to want to stay tuned for that. But Joe, thank you again, man, and I wish you all the best.
Thank you, Brett. You too. Appreciate it.